Sunday, 30th of September. It's kind of quite a day. We've had a few sprinkles roll on through. Nothing with intense vertical development. Just little showers. Just barely enough to, at most, get the ground wet, and that's happened twice. You can see the development's just kind of so-so. We've had some planes flying overhead higher than the usual weather planes. None of them show up on Flight Tracker, of course. But they've been relatively, the ones that have been leaving trails have been fairly short guys. But otherwise, it's just been kind of a quiet day. Not as much going on in the country with obvious chemtrail action on the satellite imagery, and we'll look at that a little bit later on as we get towards sunset. And if you listen, you can hear a plane now. I've been able to find him in all the clouds. He'll probably end up popping off to the west. Off here. There he is. Okay, there he is. So he's trailing. But they're still constantly working. Some days they leave more marking trails, and sometimes these are just keep the quotient of the particulates up in the atmosphere. So they're ever present, and they just don't show up on flight tracking software. They just don't. Test it for yourself. But this guy was probably more interested in this little kind of cirrus-like cloud that's up in there. And then this spot, he's just on the outside of it. But that's just now. So we're 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. And they got time lapse going with a satellite discussion. But that's really just about it. And we're going to be under high pressure here in the Rockies for about 10 days coming, with the storm off the west coast, and then general troughiness back east. So we'll see what happens. It might be a quiet 10 days for me. Noticing all the filaments coming off the top of these, and in time lapse that just shows us this churning, spinning action that the clouds are doing, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes I see the clouds kind of put through the ringer, if you will, when we see this kind of filamentary action showing up off the top. It's not always conductive to cloud development. There's another plane off here. Might not get zoomed in before he zips behind the cloud here. Yep, not quite. But he'll pop up over here in a bit. All right. There he is with the trail that kind of comes and goes. Yeah, see? On, off, on, off. Changing mixtures or just moving into a different environment. Kind of hard to say. But it's just tenuously present. See without the trail I'm going to lose him. My lighting's just not the best. Be able to keep track of him. It's probably UPS or FedEx. There he is again. So there's a few flights out here, and if there's one, two that we've seen in just this 10-minute span, then the count remains pretty high. And again, we're seeing all kinds of stuff flying in the air, and it is fall, people. Spider webs are common and abundant this time of year, so this is not spiderweb fallout from the chemtrails. Please, please, please become aware of what's naturally in the sky versus the time of year. If you've ever seen the old movie Charlotte's Web, it was that time of year when they spin their webs and they're on their way. And this is that time of year in the northern hemisphere. So enough of the orbs. I mean, there's some of those, but just white things glinting across the screen does not constitute reason for excitement. And there he goes, off across the valley. Love this camera. All right, Sunday, September 30th, coming up on 18 Mountain Time, or 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Looking at all the trails. This kind of rewinds the clock back to this morning through the Ohio Valley, and you can see all these trails as thick as they were. Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and then extending into the Carolinas. Again, a serious amount of chemtrails as they were just continuously working on this storm as it emerged from Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf coastal states. There's some amazing geometry that ended up showing up over Louisiana as they moved through the day. Don't have anything queued up to show you, but it was just unmistakable. We come into Texas and we can see some of these holes that I'm constantly harping on. We got some gravity waves showing up in here this way. In this area still, again, with anchoring holes as a primary means to make these waves manifest in this reality. We go a little farther north, and I'll slide back over, and you can see the trails in Iowa run through northern Missouri. And I know Brian Busby, KMBC up in Kansas City, and I know he's been pinged by this. I know he's been pinged by this topic, and I just really wish some of these weathermen would grow some balls, or at least a little bit of curiosity, and ask what's going on. A little more to the present, and we can still see those trails across eastern North Dakota. They're just regular intervals, and they're interested in how all of this geometry is changing in the very fluid environment that is our planet. All right, I'm going to pop up to the Pacific, water vapor imagery. Go to the College of DuPage. And this runs through 2315 UTC. It's about 5:15 Mountain Time. And we're going to come to the edge of this front. And you'll be able to see these chemtrails as they pulse the boundary between this trail of vapor as it then encounters the much drier air that's in place and denoted by the darker colors, the reds. We go up into the Gulf of Alaska, and they're engineering up here as well. So the whole breadth of the Atlantic, the whole breadth of the North Atlantic and North Pacific, subject to this engineering. I have not spent sufficient time to come to an opinion as to whether it's going on over the southern oceans as well, although it would be very difficult for me to imagine that it is not. It may not be to this extent, but nevertheless it's there. Yesterday we were looking off the coast of Oregon and the crazy trails that were happening there. Today it's a little bit farther off the Pacific Northwest coast, but nevertheless it is out there. And so when this what seemingly is fresh water comes in from the oceans, you would expect it to be pristine, or at least, the Chinese pollution and Japanese pollution not quite as profound. But then there's all of this other crap that gets rained out, and no wonder the California forests are just being decimated, that we're having ecosystem collapse and the failure to thrive of so many species because of this pollution. All right, everybody, that's just about it for Sunday, 30 September, ending this month, ending this quarter, and the next time we talk to you, it will be October, unless I step outside and see something just truly amazing. All right, everybody, keep looking up. One last something. I was just closing things down to open up Final Cut and import these videos, and just noticing this little splash thing in the satellite imagery over Montana earlier today, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, and this just had my attention. And then, right next to it, there's this set of tracks, and there's no mountain range to initiate, concentric wave like that. And then if you look closely, we have little holes inside them. Come down a little farther, we have more holes inside of cubes. And then we have some other counter waves, again with cross holes in through here. I mean, it's just, the closer you look at what's going on in the clouds, the more bizarre it gets. And, I'll just leave it at that. One of these days, weathermen will actually begin to look at the sky with some different eyes, with some curious eyes, rather than just accepting what is there as being natural. Because there's just nothing that's left that's natural with our weather these days. There's just nothing left. All of these holes in through here and all of these points. I posted a Boyd Bushman interview a couple of days ago, and it talks about these holes being, in these particular cases, these subsidence holes, anodes. Where you have an anode, you need a node. An anode is a spiral of downward air. A node would be a spiral of upward moving air. And there's going to be a resonance or a pattern or a distance between them. And we're seeing those in the smallest, the finest of scales. We're seeing these holes. And so maybe it's just because they've been there so long that we're just accepting them for what they are. But when you have somebody who was a scientist at Lockheed Martin with who's still under non-disclosures, even though he's been retired for some period of time, telling you this is what this is what's going on, you tend to want to listen. In any case, I just thought I had to point out this up in Montana. We have kind of like a splash here, and then these lines radiating out, and then right next to it, this track. All right, weather's just going to get weirder and weirder. My friends, weirder and weirder as we move on into fall and then through this winter. I just have this feeling that we're going to be hunkering down for the winter. It's going to be a rather intense one. All right, everybody, that is the end of Sunday, September 30th. All right, everybody, be well.